I have a question about time.
Yes.
And I try to sum it up for myself in one sentence to make it clear so I can understand it myself.
Yes.
And
we're very curious.
Yes, me too. Because it's so blurry and it's kind of mixed together. It's so large, it's so wide. It's in the end just a question mark.
Yes.
Time. And underneath time, a big question mark. And I think it's about the sense of time.
Yes.
Another human, very intelligent, said that you are where time comes from.
In a sense, yes, that could be true.
It could be true, and maybe it is. And then what? And then how can one integrate more the sense, the feeling of time to...
Well, we can give you a bit our perspective on it and then see if you want to play from that. From our perspective, time doesn't really exist because there's just frequency in a sense. But time and space is an effect of your physical reality and your experience of that. We would say that your physical reality is also a form of consciousness, but it's much more crystallized. So just like water can have different states, from being a vapor or a fluid or ice, of which ice is the very crystallized form, so your physical reality is what we perceive to be a crystallized form of consciousness. Now the moment you crystallize it, just like ice, everything becomes very solid, and then it is much harder for one water molecule here to go to there. And if it could do that, then it needs to go through a linear perspective, and then this change in space also creates this idea of time, and vice versa. From our side, if you would say water is a vapor, then it works much more with frequency consciousness. So then if two water molecules feel that they want to be together, they simply, in a sense, go to each other based on frequency. And because of that, time, in a sense, doesn't really exist, because there's just simply frequency. If there isn't a resistance, if there isn't a crystallization of the consciousness, then the moment you embody the frequency, you are in the here and now, that frequency called towards it, in a sense. So in that sense, time and space is very specifically a method for your brain and your point of view as a human being to learn, to place things in a linear order, so you get an orderly fashion of growth and expansion. But all of these things, when you get to other levels, it's much more in the here and now. We don't know if that made any sense at all, but feel free to comment on this or let us know if you want to play more from this.
It does make sense, all of it, and it's like a beautiful illustration of something so abstract. And
you will notice this, maybe you have noticed, we know you've noticed this in your own life already. The more you raise your own frequency, the more you suddenly get into synchronicities. So this is already a bit of an effect of that. But yes, just to open it up even further, depending on your own frequency, you actually open up timelines all the time. So if you become aware of your own frequency, and if you start to understand that your inner frequency is in a sense causing your physical reality around you, which is a reflection of it, then the moment you feel there's something off in your outer world and you start to change that on the inside and you start to integrate it, you look into it, you do inquiry, you do processes to get it to the front, to integrate it, to be open to it, learn the lessons out of it, then you change your own frequency, and then suddenly you open up other timelines. So where you might have had the same behavior because you were always blaming somebody else for something, and the moment you're in that frequency and you haven't integrated it, you will always walk a path that will deal with that issue. So it will, in a sense, mirror that issue back to you. And this is so much fun of your physical reality. It will do that until you learn the lesson. So in that sense, you could spend 40 years before somebody is suddenly like, oh, wait a minute, this is something I need to deal with myself. Then they change it, and suddenly that whole series of timelines isn't relevant for them anymore. So they suddenly open up whole new timelines for themselves. So in that sense, even your linear time as you see it isn't that linear. And you might have experienced this as well. And this is also why we recommend that people really work with themselves. Because the more you work with yourself, the more you integrate all these things, the more you become aware of your broader self. And this is both the shadow aspects as simply understanding how to navigate reality, understanding that you are consciousness, that you are part of all that is, then you can really start to open up timelines that are more and more exciting to you and more fun. And then, in a sense, you then already are shifting time, if this makes any sense at all.
Yeah, it does. And it gets less annoying, because I just want to scream many times now when you were talking, but not anymore. I would just want to know what 1 hour feels like. And now that strong feeling is not so. That feeling is not so strong any longer. I just want to. Well, yes. Now that I talk about it, it's here again.
No, but how an hour feels is very much dependent upon your own frequency. In a sense, what happens? Generally, what happens? You are a certain frequency. You incarnate with a certain frequency. And this frequency contains things that you're really excited about, but it also contains things you need to learn, and often you will learn those through your excitement, but you will always run into blocks, or what you perceive as blocks, because these are simply the things that you need to study and integrate. So this is where your growth is. Now, the more you learn about this, to give an example, the channel, when he really started doing the work do a lot of self-inquiry, what happens then is the moment you feel a bit of negative emotion, the moment you dive into that almost aggressively, you really pounce on it, what is this? Why am I feeling this? Try to learn and really feel it, try to find why it's there, see if there's any thoughts related to it, and then the moment you shift those thoughts and integrate it, then your physical reality doesn't need to mirror it to you anymore. So simply by doing that, you can open up, you can actually make your surroundings a lot more pleasurable. Now, if you don't know how to do this yet, then in a sense, physical reality is giving you a service. Something is bothering you. First, it will give you a emotional feeling about this. And if the emotion is negative, it means that there is something inside of you that is not totally in alignment with your higher self. This is totally fine. Then if you ignore it, what happens is that your universe, in a sense, will play it out almost as in a real computer game. So if you did not catch the emotion, and did not restore it there, then the projection becomes stronger, and then it will play out in your physical reality. By going through it in physical reality, you will experience things, you will gain new viewpoints, and some of these viewpoints can suddenly then, oh, wait a minute, this is what I had to learn about this. And then you shift it. So, to come back to your question, what does an hour feel like? If you are into a very heavy subject out here in reality, and you're really like just blaming your surroundings, and you don't feel good because you have ignored or you simply don't know how to transform these issues, then an hour can be very long, and it's gonna be in a relatively low frequency, so it's gonna be more crystallized in a sense. And that is why time would be perceived to be longer, because you are more crystallized. You are more absorbed in the crystallized reality. Now, if you do something that is really exciting to you, an hour can feel maybe the same, but it will at least have a much higher frequency, but generally it will seem shorter because of that as well. Yeah. So how you perceive an hour can be very different.
Yes. Yes, that's so. It is. And because I see that now, how the thoughts, like the work by Byron, and when I ask those questions, it's about wasting my time. And that's why I have the, So yes. that's the thoughts. I'm wasting my time.
People shouldn't waste their time. You can research that thought.
Yeah. By working, for example.
For example. But can people waste time? Is that even a possibility?
So that's the next... so it's... Yeah, exactly. No, it's not. It depends on how you look at it, but...
Yes.
That's an entrance to... Yeah, thank you.
Yes, you're very welcome.
Time is not so important, actually.
No, in a sense, you always create it anyway. So there's exactly as much time as you want. And especially the past and the future, they're just ideas that you recreate from the now. So in one sense, you've never been into the past or into the future either. These are just conceptual worlds of the mind that you project into. So in a sense, there is only the here and now ever. But depending on how much you are in your mind, and this is very much also how your brain works, because it works very linearly, and that is useful as well. It is a useful way to perceive and understand and to process this crystallized physical reality. So it's a useful tool, but the more you learn about these things, the more you can kind of, in a sense, dance with it as well.
Yeah, and I was today deleting 4,000 emails.
Yes.
So that's back to 2012.
Wow.
Yes. And I just saw everything, and I read some of them, and then now, like 2013, 14, I don't know how many years that is. 4 years or something. 4 years. 4 years. What is? How do I? That's very overwhelming. No, it's confusing. I don't know.
You created a lot of time for yourself, maybe, by getting rid of those.
Yeah, I just saw what I have been doing in those 4 years. It was like watching the 4 last years and having a sense that it never existed. And at the same time, it must have done, because it was written there in the email, so...
Yes, you got the proof.
All those travels, all those flights,
yes.
All those people, all those places.
And this is, in a sense... Yes, it is... All these things were at here and nows. But your mind strings them together, like it's almost like how you make a necklace of different beads. You just take an experience and then you put a next experience, but it's actually your mind that kind of connects them in a linear way. But Yes, that is basically how physical reality is navigated. But you will notice that the more you raise your frequency and the more slippery time may become, that the more how we navigate it is basically frequency. So if you had a really nice experience 3 years ago, you can actually use that in the here and now to raise your own frequency. And in a sense you can re-experience that, because you can pull in that frequency into the here and now and then relive that frequency. And if you want to have a bad day, you can find something very depressing and also recreate that in the now. And this is simply how, once you understand this, and once you understand that it's all about frequency, what you can do is in a conscious way start pulling all the high frequency stuff that you have experienced and pull it into the now and focus on it in the here and now. And then if you want to improve that even further, start using your imagination and think up the most exciting, thrilling, fun thing you can imagine, and then pull it into the here and now. And bathe in that frequency. And by doing that, you can consciously pull high frequencies towards you, focus on it, and in that way raise your frequency. Now what will happen when you do this, and when you do this in a focused way, you will raise your frequency, and because of that, if there is baggage left, that will come up also. But that will actually give you the chance to reconnect with that and integrate that. And then you can see it's actually a great way to really shift your own timelines. In a sense, you're speeding up.
Yeah, that's... Yes. Thank you.
Yes.